What I would say is let's start. We'll start. Yeah, we are live. Hey, everybody. I would say let's. I know an email just went out saying we're going live, so let's give it about a minute or two, and then we'll officially get started. All
I
right,
don't think
we
we have
have.
anybody on.
Yeah, let me put it right now.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Tim Selden, and this is Finding the Perfect Match. This week, we are welcoming our friends from Chancey and Bruce, Suzanne, and Nikki and Leah, and they are here with my colleague Clint Lausch and I to talk more about early childhood developmental assessments. One of the things that I really appreciate is the fact that many of us, whether we're in K-8 schools or early childhood centers only, or even K-12 schools, we really have lots of children who are coming to us who are under kindergarten age. And trying to get an accurate sense of where they're at is something that many parents care about. If you're a Montessori school or if you're a developmentally based school, the odds are you feel like you've got a good handle on what's going on with children. But that's not the same as giving parents a tangible report that they can look at and trust. And there are so many situations where we want it, either because we're wondering if a child has a developmental delay, maybe in language development or eye-hand coordination or any number of different social, emotional, physical things. And Chancey and Bruce is one of the very few developmental screening tools that I know of that can be administered by people who are not licensed diagnosticians or clinical psychologists. There are so many situations where schools like ours would want to use something like Chancey and Bruce. And for that reason, I really have enjoyed getting to know you three. I've really enjoyed getting to know more about your service, and I've encouraged you to share information with our school members. So again, Antoinette, Debbie, Devika, thank you for being here. Hope others will be joining us in a few minutes. I see Marema has just joined. Um, and we'll, of course, be posting this on the Foundation's YouTube channels. Clint, any housekeeping before we get going?
Might have jumped off. I think he's muted and no camera, so maybe he's on a pause.
Not a problem. Anyway, the bottom line, folks, is if you have anything you want to ask, just raise your hand. We can unmute you. If you have questions, put it in the chat. Clint, is there anything that you wanted to say?
Yeah, I went muted there while you were talking, and I couldn't find the Zoom screen anymore. Yeah, when you're going to leave today's session, the other thing is it's gonna pop up with a quick survey. One, let us know how you like today's session. There's also another question on there, two more questions about one, what do you want to hear more from us in the future, especially as it's related to the topic of screening and developmental progress for children, and then if you want to get access to this screening process and the tools and the resources from Chancey and the team here at Chancey and Bruce. There's just a question there. Hey, I would like some more information. I'd like to chat with them. Just check yes or no, reach out, get some more information. And, Nikki, Suzanne, maybe towards the end, talk about the training that's involved, like we did on our last session, just to remind everybody, especially for those that hop on. And so, yeah, I think that's the main thing besides the recording. And so, with that being said, I think, yeah, why don't you take it away?
Great. Nikki, why don't you start by just reminding us who you folks are and who is Chancey and who is Bruce and how do people interact with your company?
Well, thank you, Tim, for having us, Tim and Clint for having us today. We're excited. We had a more of a deep dive on our company a few weeks ago that I think you have the YouTube link. So today was more the practical of the assessment. But for those of you guys who are new, I can just do a quick zoom out. I'm not Chancey, and Suzanne and Aaliyah are not Bruce. None of us are either one of those, but Dr. Chancey and Dr. Bruce, who are our founders. They both have their doctorate in education. Bonnie has a specialty in special education. and they were moms and started their children's educational journey with kindergarten on their first day. They're best friends, so they had their kids enrolled in the same school, and they walked in, and she said within the first 20 minutes we looked at each other and said half of these kids should not be here. Developmentally and chronologically, they were not 5. So in California, you have to be 5 by September 1st to qualify for kindergarten, and a lot of those kids did based on their chronological age, but developmentally they were not there. So based on these pathways that you see on the screen, from social emotional to comprehension to the visuals to the language to the auditory to the motor skills, she said about 40% of those students didn't have the skills needed to the milestones for those skills to enter into kindergarten. So they developed this assessment, and away they went, and they had over 500 schools in Southern California, have tested over 500,000 students. My first interaction with Chancey Bruce, ironically, was as a parent. So my son, who's a senior this year, 18 years old, 14 years ago, took this assessment at a school, and I received the results. He's a September birthday. At that time, it was actually September 10th, so he could technically go to kindergarten. They recommended the gift of time, which is something you'll hear me talk about often in our trainings. Is the gift of time is that TK, pre-K, 4-year-old classroom that gives students the ability for one more year to really fine tune and build the baseline to learn based off those pathways. So it's a year to really dig deep with your roots for your motor skills and your auditory skills and all the skills necessary to learn. So we're grateful we did that. He's a senior graduating this year. I couldn't imagine how he would be doing as a first-year college student. And then I transitioned into an administrator of a private school here in Southern California, and we used this assessment for 30 years. So I'd only been there for 15, but of those 15 years, we'd used it in 15 years prior. And so when Bonnie and Barb were going to retire, Bonnie actually was going to retire the company, we panicked. We're like, no, you can't. We need this assessment. We use it as an enrollment tool. We use it as an assessment tool to see where our kids are at. And fast forward through lots of heart conversations, because she wanted to make sure that we were developmentally aligned. Our pedagogy was aligned with hers. She allowed us to purchase her company, and we've just been so blessed to be a part of it. We have big shoes to fill, and we love sharing and partnering with Montessori schools to help them use this as a tool as well.
Well, that's great. So I thought today would be really good if you could give the people who attend a picture of what it's like to actually administer this. I have done it myself, not with your particular assessment, a very similar assessment, Meeting Street, and we found it invaluable years ago to do this kind of thing with young kids for any number of reasons. So I think that if they haven't seen it before, it really makes it more real to get a sense of what it's like to actually sit a very young child down and do this.
Well, we have a very young child here, Aaliyah, who's going to be practicing as a very young child. Last time when we did the webinar, we kind of did more of a deep dive on the pathways and a zoom out of the assessment. I can just give a 2-minute explanation on that, and then we can actually get into the practicalities, because I know I was on the other side as an administrator just getting the results. And once we purchased the company and we went through the assessment, we're trained on the assessment, I remember being like, wow, this is actually really good. The information, the content, the way it's asked, the questions, all the goodies that came with it. It's very comprehensive. So the assessment is a 20 to 30-minute one-on-one assessment. It's very user-friendly. Everything's color coordinated. It comes with several bags. I have it here so you can see the different bags. So everything is color coordinated. The bags match the assessment. 20 to 30 minutes is done with a child, and it covers these pathways. And I'll just do a quick overview. So we look at social emotional. That part of the assessment is not done in that 20 to 30 minutes. A portion of it is. When you sign up to do the assessment, a questionnaire goes out to the parent, a questionnaire goes out to the teacher. It collects data off from the parent all the way from birth to any trauma has happened in the child's life. And then there's 18 questions about their social emotional development, if they can share, if they show interest in others, in all the basics of milestones of what a 4 to 5-year-old social development would look like. That same questionnaire then goes to the teacher. So now we have information from the parent, we have information from the teacher, and then the screener, which would be myself, would also be putting in some information of what my observations look like, and that's how we get the social emotional. The rest of the pathways is done through this assessment book here. Everything's color coordinated, as I showed you, the green, the orange, the blue, everything. When you don't even need to know the pathways, you look at pink auditory discrimination, you just grab your pink book, your pink packet that has all the goodies for it, and I'll show you what that looks like. But we look at fine and gross motor. So we look at the small muscle development, pensograph, the importance of holding a pencil, zipping up your pants, buttoning your shirt, opening up your string cheese, all those important things. We look at gross motor. That's a safety issue, but also core strength is shown to really help students while they're sitting in class, and really once they start reading and writing and sitting in more longer periods, to have that core strength to hold the pencil. So the fine and gross motor are very important, how they work together. Then we have the visuals. So we have visual memory and visual discrimination. Visual memory, just good old-fashioned memorization. So some of the memory games and the ability to accurately recall what they've seen. And then visual discrimination is huge. And what we're seeing because of technology, there is a lack, there is a delay for a lot of students. And visual discrimination is the ability to differentiate the different symbols and forms they see. So you'll see in one of the questions I asked, there's two pictures. They're very similar to each other. We asked the student, pick the two that are alike. And if they're unable to tell that one girl has a ponytail and the other one doesn't, and the two pictures are alike, they're probably going to struggle with the B and a D. And that's why we look at the visual discrimination very closely. A lot of schools put a lot of value on that. And then you have the language, which is huge. We all know language is a part of the developmental process. So expressive language, the ability to express; receptive language, the ability to take in information and process it. This is really big, coming from our incoming kindergarten teachers asking us, please do not send us students who still struggle with receptive language, AKA a 2 or 3 step instruction, something that's happening all throughout the day. So you have the teachers throughout the day are asking students to do 2 to 3 tasks, step instructions, and the students are struggling with that. That's just pure delay in receptive language, taking in that information and responding, which is also tied to auditory discrimination and auditory memory. So the ability to memorize what's been told, retain and recall information. Auditory discrimination, we're looking at sounds, auditory stimuli, tied into literacy is the beginning, medial, and ending sounds. And then the last pathway is comprehension. Lots of words, lots of details, but I think if we jump into it, it might be helpful. So you guys can see what it looks like. The test is live and it scores from 2.5 to 6.5. So you can range anywhere from a 2.5-year development to a 6.5-year development. For practice purposes, we're going to pretend that we're with a 4-year-old. And so I would be asking most of the 4, 4.5, and 5-year-old questions to see if she would land the results. Once you input the information into the system, it sends to us, and then we give you back a very detailed result sheet that I can share with you at the end. Any questions about what I shared right now about the scoring, about the age range? When I say that the test is live, that means it goes with the child. So if I start with a 4-year-old and she's answering the questions, you can either get a plus if they get it right the first time, a 2 if they get it right the second time. After that, it's a 0. So if I'm assessing a 4-year-old and they keep getting 0s and 2s, there's no need for me to keep going up higher because the child is showing us that they're struggling. So what we would do is go backwards. So it goes with the child. If the child is scoring, is answering the questions, you keep moving up. And if they're struggling, you move down. There is an average that we ask because the sky's the limit. You could start with a 2-year-old and ask all the questions to 6.5, or you can start with a 6.5-year-old and go all the way down to 2.5. That test would probably take an hour and a half, which we know is not practical. So during the training, we go through, there's an algorithm of how many questions to ask, when to move up, when to move down, but we're going to pretend that we have a pretty standard student and maybe struggling with some areas that we can go through as we do this assessment. Any questions on what I just shared? Let me see if I can pull up the chat box, or maybe if you guys can see it, because I'm sharing my screen right now. No questions?
No questions have come in. I'm monitoring that.
Okay.
There are people that have just joined us. I see Soraya, for example, and Lenore and so forth. Just to be clear, what we're doing is Nicky Magnuson and Leah from Chancey and Bruce are going to model how the early childhood developmental screening is actually administered. And, they're not going to do necessarily the whole thing, but the goal is to give us a sense of what it's like to sit there with a child who's probably 3 or 4 years old and administer this evaluation. Go ahead, Nikki.
I think as teachers and educators, we're best when we see it done live. That's for us too, when we got the training live. So hopefully this will be helpful. So the test, like I said, starts with 2.5, goes to 6.5. I'm going to start with fine motor, which is the first assessment. It's green. You'd pull out your green bag. It's got all your materials labeled in here. I'm going to start with the younger questions for this purpose, but if just pretend we are assessing a 2.5-year-old. This is standardized, so it is scripted. And once you administer the assessment long enough, you really start memorizing. But Bonnie's goal was that every question is asked the exact same way, whether it's here or in another country or another state, so we can get a true read and it would be considered standardized. So I'm going to show you what you would want to do and what you wouldn't want to do just with this first question. So if you look at prompt 1, we're unscrewing a lid from a jar. And the materials is a lid in a jar. This would be in your assessment book. And I would tell the student, watch me. Now you take it off. All right. Now this is how you would do it the second time. Watch me. Now you take it off. All right, great job. So that would be the way you'd want to ask a question the second time. The second time you would not want to ask a question. Now watch me, see, I put my hands on the top and I'm moving my fingers this way and I want you to do it just like that. That's not what we would want to do because that would not be a fair assessment because she might be getting different instructions than another child. So we really want to follow this prompt. So if she got it right the second time, we would give her a 2. Now we're moving on to prompt 2, which is 5 cubes. I would say, I want you to build a tower with these blocks. Now, if you notice, we're assessing fine motor. So I take it down and I say, now you do it like this. Because we're doing fine motor, as long as she's building the blocks, because we're looking at fine motor and she does it correctly, it's a plus. We're not doing visual discrimination. If it was visual discrimination and I had a specific pattern, let's say, we'd want her to follow the specific pattern. That's not part of the assessment. So I always share with people, some of you had that history teacher that maybe marked you off because your essay had improper spelling, but the content was great. We're not going to be that history teacher. We're looking specifically at each pathway. So this is fine motor. We're looking at fine motor. We're not looking at visual if they are getting the pattern correctly. So that would be the first question. Then you would move on to prompt 1 for an older age. And actually, let me just scroll down really quick to show you what some of the older questions are. So for example, as they get older and you're moving into 54 months, we would say to the child, we'd have a piece of paper here and say, look at this. I want you to draw one just like it. And right here, as you can see, there's a credit and no credit. If they would get it right the first time, it's a plus. The second time would be a 2. After that would be a 0. Fine motor is pretty standard, so I'm just going to show you really quick some of the different symbols and credit that they're doing. But for example, this one is very difficult, and I love this one because you can see the creativity. So we would say to the child, look at this, make one just like it. And it's amazing to see all the different ways children can come up with making this envelope symbol. But as you can see, this would be considered credit and this would be considered no credit. So that would be a fine motor section. Any questions on fine motor? We're going to move on to visual discrimination. Nope. All right. Visual discrimination. And normally when you take the assessment, you have all your goodies here and you just pull out the orange. Now you have your bag and then you move on to visual discrimination. And for visual discrimination, we're going to start here at 54 months. So you can have an idea of what a 4.5-year-old question would look like. So here we would show them this prompt. And I would tell the child, actually, yep, this one's for 4 years old. I would say, see this shape? I want you to point to the other shapes that look just like it. So she pointed at 1 square and 2 squares and 3 squares. And if you look, as far as giving credit here, they would have to select at least 3 identical shapes. So once she selected 3 of those squares, it's a plus. And then we move on to the next prompt. Now watch how things get a little bit more difficult. As you can see, this is for a 4.5-year-old. And I would show her this picture. And I would say to her, I want you to look at these pictures. Now, really quick, anytime you have more than 2 prompts, you would cover the bottom prompt. So for this one, I would cover it with something, maybe a piece of paper, you cover the bottom so they're not distracted. So she's only seeing this one and not the one above it. And say, I want you to look at these pictures. Point to the 2 that are alike. So she pointed to these 2. Okay, so obviously she did not see how much they were like. As you can tell, one has a ponytail, one does not. So then I would move to prompt 2 and I would ask the same question. Now I want you to look at these pictures, point to the 2 that are alike. Okay, and she was able to identify the 2, the second and the fourth one. So she got that correct. It's a plus, so we keep moving up. Now we're moving on to letters. So again, I would show her this one and I would say, look at these rows of letters. I want you to point to the 2 that are alike. She pointed to the 2 G's. She only needs to do 1. We're moving on to the next prompt. Now watch how things change very quickly. Now we're showing the child these shapes. So we would show them just these 2 and say, look at these shapes. Point to the one that is different. She just pointed to a bunch of different shapes. So then now I'd move on to the next one and I'd ask the same question, covering the rest. Look at these shapes. Look at these 3 shapes. Point to the one that is different. Okay, she pointed to the correct answer. The next one. Now look at these shapes. Point to the one that is different. Correct. And the next one. Now look at these 3 shapes. Can you point to the one that's different? Great job. And the last one, look at these 3 shapes. Can you point to the one that's different? Awesome. She got that correct. So that's a plus. If you notice, there's 5 questions, but we only need to give credit if they've done 4 of the 5. So there is room for sometimes children need to hear direction, maybe a little the second time for more clarity. And now we're moving on to design. So we would move on to this question, cover this, and just show them this. Are these designs in the same or different direction? Now, remember, we are assessing visual discrimination. I've assessed students that struggle with selective mutism that won't speak. So because this is visual discrimination, if the child is either shy or is unable to speak, they can just give you a thumbs up or thumbs down because what we're assessing is visual discrimination. So I would say, are these designs going in the same direction or different direction? Okay. Same, great job. Next one. Are these designs going the same direction or different direction? Same, good. How about these? Are these going in the same direction or different direction? Different, awesome. And what about this last one? Are these going in the same direction or different direction? Same, great job. Okay, so then they would get a plus. We move on to the next question here. Again, they only need 2 of their 3 sets. I would say the faces, one of these faces is missing something. Which one is it? And she pointed to the middle one, which is correct. And then the next one says, one of these coats is missing something. Which one is it? Correct. So she pointed to this one. She got 2 of the 3. And if you noticed, I'm not asking her to point to the nose. I'm just saying point to the one that's missing something. So for this question, they wouldn't have to say the nose is missing something. They would just point to the face that's missing something. So these would be considered visual discrimination questions. There's many more, obviously, that keeps going with the age. But any questions on visual discrimination before we move on to the next one, which is visual memory? I'm just kind of scanning it so you kind of get a view. Visual memory is blue. It has the most amount of goodies. It's got, if you can see, all these different cards that go with parts of the assessment. Moving on to visual memory, I'm going to pull out my blue bag. I've got all my goodies in there. Everything is labeled. If you notice, we're going to start at 4.5 years old. And for this one, let's see, it's right here. So 4.5. If you notice, these are the cards, they're VM cards. So just in case you're not super organized, everything is organized here for you. But if you happen to lose a set of cards, let's say these cards are floating somewhere, these are the cards you're using. They're floating somewhere in the bottom of your card and you're like, holy moly, where did these go? They're labeled right here for you, visual memory 4. So you'll always be able to put them right back. So for this one, you say, watch me put it in order. See this one, then this one, then this one. Oops. Now you do it. She did triangle, circle, square. She did it correct. She gets a plus. We move on to the next one. We're doing the same thing now with animals. And if you notice, it's only 3 object sequence, but we give you 5 cards, and that's in case they need a prompt 2. So prompt 1, let's say use a pig, a bear, and a seal. Well, prompt 2, then you could use a different set of animals. So for this one, I'm going to say, watch why I put these in order. See this one, then this one, then this one. Now you do it. Great job. So she put them in order. Now, if she didn't get those right, I would use a different set of cards. That's why we give you 5 of them. And then here we're doing blocks again, but notice where if you look at the procedure, we're asking you to do this block one, not in front of the child. So we're asking that the child does not watch you build it. So you would have your blocks. I would build this behind because we're looking at visual memory. I would build it behind my book first. I'm going to build this one. The second prompt, or the first prompt, and I would say, I'm going to build something behind the card. And so I show it to the child for 5 seconds. And I hand it over to her and I say, now you build them just like it. Great job. So she did it. It's a plus. You move on to the next prompt. So these are some questions. Other things, as you notice, as they get older, this is a 5.5-year-old question. Now we're asking for shapes and we're putting them in order versus 3 shapes. So those are the visual memory questions. Any questions on visual memory as we move on? Now we're moving to the auditory. One thing that's really important that Bonnie recommended, and that's part of the assessment, is when you do anything auditory, we don't want them reading our lips. So you would do it all behind a piece of paper. I usually have with me. And I can use this gift of time book. So you would want to be covering your mouth during the assessment. You could also do behind the child. It could become a distraction. But we are going to start this one with, I'm going to ask some 5.5-year-old questions for auditory memory. So you can see we're doing a lot of sounds. We're doing a lot of repeating of 1-syllable questions. So for the 5.5-year-old, here's some questions right here. Okay. So I would tell the student, look at these 2 pictures. I'm going to say a word. I want you to point to the one that starts with the same sound. So then I would show this foot and I would say, finger. She would point to the feet. That's correct. Then the next one, I would say soap. She pointed to the leaf. So that would be incorrect, but she has one more off chance because she only needs to get 2 of the 3. Then this one is dog. And she pointed to the duck. That's correct. She got 2 of the 3. We can move on to the next one. Here, these ones, I'm going to say 2 words. If these 2 words sound the same, say yes. And if they do not, say no. Tab, tab. Yes. Fold, mold. Yes. Jug, jug. Yes. Jot, got. No. Felt, felt. Yes. Okay, so she got 4 of the 5. We move on to the next set of questions. Now we're moving on to rhyming words. As you can see, gets a little bit more difficult. Show the child the goat and the duck, name them. So I say goat, duck. Which rhymes with boat? Goat. Great. Heart, girl. Which rhymes with squirrel? And she pointed to the girl, which is fine because, again, we're just seeing if she can recognize. And then train, dress. Which one rhymes with rain? She pointed to the dress. So that one would be a 2 because she only, or got a 0 because she only got 1 of the 3 right. And then you move on to, these are again, beginning, medial, ending sounds, but as it progresses, as the ages progress, the questions get more difficult. And those would be considered auditory discrimination questions. Moving on to auditory memory. We're going to start off with some 5.5-year-old questions. So you can see a little bit more detailed set of questions. All right. So Oh, this is 4.5 and 5.5. Okay. This auditory memory, am I the right one? Let's see, prompt 1. I might have gone up a little too high. Yeah, 60 months. Okay, I could do this one. So this is good. This is a 3-step instruction. This is really important. We always want to make sure that this assessment, this part of the assessment is covered, especially for entering kindergarten. And so auditory memory, I have my little book, got everything. I'll take it out. And I have the goodies. Where is my okay, put 1. All right, here you go. I put a bell in front of her. I'm going to ask you to do 3 things. Listen, and then you do it. Touch your nose, clap your hands, ring the bell. And there's your 3-step instruction. If they don't get it right the first time, there's a prompt too. Next, we move on to the digits. So I'm covering my mouth. I'm going to say numbers. Listen, and then you say them. 4, 1, 3, 5.
4, 1, 3, 5.
Okay, she just needs 1 set of the 2. And then we move on to 6.5. Now we're moving the younger ages here. You can see that they're saying 4-word series. When you're asking a 2-year-old, you're usually saying a 2-word series. So as a child gets older, the complexity gets a little bit more layered. I'm going to say 4 words. Listen while I say them, then you say them. Bird, door, foot, skirt.
Bird, door, skirt.
Okay, let's try another set. I'm going to say 4 new words. Listen while I say them, then you say them. Pie, chair, milk, ball.
Pie, chair, milk, ball.
Okay, so that was number 2. So she would get a 2 for doing it the second time. And then part of this, there's a short little story that we asked. There's a little bit of comprehension, but it's also auditory memory for this one. So that would be the auditory memory section. We're moving on. We're almost done. We got the languages and comprehension. Any questions so far on auditory skills? Now we're moving to receptive language. This is actually one of my favorites. We're going to start a little bit earlier for these questions. I'll show you some questions for a 3.5-year-old.
Nikki, hang
So
on.
for this,
Nikki,
yep.
hang on just a second. You guys are doing great. I'd just like to ask everyone who's on board, would you go to the chat and let us know on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being, this is great, I understand, this is useful, 1 being, I don't think this really applies to me. Can you let us know in any way you want? You can put in words like not applicable or really useful or great, but put into the chat something that gives us some feedback about whether what Nikki and Leah are covering, whether that makes sense to you.
I'm taking mine. We're giving you the appetizer version.
Right. Polly says it's been great. This is what she needs.
Oh, good.
You know, yeah, I just sent you a text from Dr. Robin Howe from the Montessori Foundation staff who works with a lot of our schools, and he said, I need it right now. So all of you got a text from me. So somebody write back to him. Antoinette says 5, it makes sense. It's insightful. Thank you, Antoinette. I thought it would be. And I really appreciate this. I mean, the pictures, in my opinion, are, they're old-fashioned. They look like the 1960s, but, it still works. And one of the things I want to do is to see if we can help you, bring some of the stuff up to date and make sure it's all tested and validated just as the original was, because some of it becomes culturally a little tricky. Soraya says it makes sense, but it's very fast. If needed, are these materials cards for sale? Nikki, can you explain? I know the answer, but.
Yes, I'm definitely going a lot faster than normal, and I'm asking sometimes more questions. You want to ask about 4 questions. So the assessment's 20 to 40 minutes, so 30 minutes is the perfect spot. And yes, the kits we sell, the complete kit, which is the book itself, and then all the supplies for $350, but you need to go through a training. So we don't just send you a kit. Also because there's an algorithm for the scoring. So once you input the information, I can just show you, this might be helpful to see what you would be getting as far as results. So this is a demo student result. So once this is all done, so for this child, perfect, she's 4.5, so you can see the child's age. Based on Chancey and Bruce's pedagogy, we believe that a child 6 months above or 6 months below their age would be considered age appropriate. So if you have a 4-year-old and they're scoring at a 4.5 or in a 3.5, that would be considered age appropriate. Anything outside of that, especially on the more delayed side, we start considering as emerging or non-age appropriate. And parents sometimes struggle with that. I say this in every Zoom or any opportunity I get. My favorite part, bless you, of this entire business has been working with parents. And I happily agree to be the bad guy in this sometimes when we send the results and the parents struggle. I offer monthly Zooms, sometimes weekly Zooms. And what we love to do with parents is really break this down and unpack it for them to understand why we look at what we do and why, for example, a child that's 4.5 that's scoring 2.5 or even 3 years old in certain pathways need that extra year before they go into kindergarten. And what that looks like. And most of the time I get parents that are grateful who might start off a little bit more apprehensive or frustrated because I'll share with them, can you remember your child as a 1-year-old versus a 2-year-old, that 1 year gap, what a huge developmental difference that is. Can you imagine your 4-year-old child that's about to go into kindergarten next year, that's in a 1.5 years delayed in these pathways, how significantly that can impact learning. And I break it down and they really do understand. And I think in most parts, they appreciate you as a school for conducting this assessment because it helps you really identify which areas you want to focus on. But the fact that you've even taken the time to see if this child's ready versus just pump them up based on their age, we're really looking at their developmental abilities and if that's matching their chronological.
So
Yes.
Rapali asks, how does this screening that you've got compare with the DIBELS or other similar standardized screening tools?
DIBELS is definitely a lot more academic. I remember when I taught first grade or in kindergarten in the public schools, I was trained in it. It's a lot more, you're looking at literacy, letter recognition, number recognition. This is 100% pathways. This is not what does the child know? This is, does the child have the ability to learn? Can they hold a pencil? Are they able to visually discriminate different symbols? So when they are going into a DIBELS assessment and being exposed to a B and a D, if they're unable to tell the difference between that girl in a ponytail, just a little tiny thing on her head, they're not going to tell the difference between a J and an I. It's all going to look the same to them. So what we look at is, do they have the foundation to enter to kindergarten and hit those rigorous standards that I know most states are practicing now in kindergarten. Kindergarten now is very different than kindergarten 20 years ago even. But the foundation to learn now is the same foundation as 50 years ago because they still need to know how to properly hold a pencil. They still need to discriminate the different sounds. They still need to be able to take a 3-step instruction when all the actions happening throughout the day and they feel lost because every 10 minutes there's a transition going on. So this test is tried true and through, and it's research. We have a ton of research on longitudinal research that Bonnie has conducted on top of just research on the importance of each of these pathways.
Great answer. By the way, Tabika says, this is great. It's very helpful for both the teachers and the children in their learning process of development. I just want to echo in on what you said. I couldn't agree more. I mean, the DIBELS is a very useful tool. There are other tools, but I don't know of anything currently available that's quite as comprehensive as what I found in your particular solution. I am also a great advocate of MEFS, which is the Minnesota Executive Function Skills Test, which is very similar in some ways, but measures different things. And I think one of my points is, as educators, we want to support our teachers in knowing those children really well, and more importantly, in having a way of communicating what our observation and our practical experience is telling us about the children's development and something tangible that parents can understand. And I personally think that the Chancey and Bruce and the MEFs together would be a very powerful tool for those of us who are working with children under 6. And DIBELS is certainly useful at age 5, but as Nicky says, it's a different kind of tool that fits in too.
Yep. Just to show you, for some of you who have not seen the results, And I'm not saying this because I work for Chancey and Bruce, but I have yet to come across any assessment for the ages of 2.5 to 6.5 that's this detailed and this formalized, along with also with recommendations of what to do next, which we just added 2 years ago. So here, if you look at the fine motor, this child in fine motor, they're age appropriate, they're 4.5. So if they're 5 in fine motor, it's great. Visual memory, they're 4 years, 10 months. They're pretty much age appropriate. But then look at auditory memory, they're advanced. They're 5 years, 4 months. So almost a year, an entire year advanced, which for me in auditory memory, that's a great skill to be advanced and entering kindergarten. But then you move down to comprehension and you can see he's 4 years, 4 months, which is emerging. I share this story often. One of my fun finds when we were doing this assessment, we were working with a very large, one of the largest preschools in Southern California, and they had over 100 students that took this assessment, and almost 90% of them scored weak in comprehension. The director was very frustrated. She called us and she thought maybe there was something wrong with us or the assessment was conducted inappropriately or something. We went back and pulled up their scores. I'm able to pull up every score and see where each child landed on each question. And we came to the conclusion that every single one of those students missed the exact same question, which is a comprehension question. And the question is, how is a dog and a cat alike? And if they couldn't answer that question, we'd ask prompt 2, how is a car and a truck alike? And we would ask them to say, you know, the dog and a cat, they're animals, are furry, they have 4 legs, they have tails, they make sounds, or pets, all those things. She went back and looked in her curriculum. They had zero comprehension comparison in any of their lessons from 2 years old and up. So it was a great awakening for her as a director to know that all her kids that have gone through her program had never been exposed to comparison. But this assessment was able to pick it up just in that one comprehension question that all the students missed because they'd never been exposed to comparison. Something so simple, but she was so grateful that we were able to identify that. So they obviously redirected their efforts. But so you can see we also have an academic portion here. Not the biggest believer that this is the end all, but I know a lot of schools, because you're in high rigor environments, the parents are wanting to know where they are academically. To us, we want to know, can they even hit the academic standards based on these pathways, let alone where they land in academics. But the academic standards are based off the national standards. So they're just basic for entering kindergarten and first grade with letter recognition and math. And then we also give a social emotional diagnostic of where the child lands. And you can see that the child social emotionally is age appropriate, but the parent and the teacher have some concerns. And if you scroll down here, you can see that they both, when we do a deeper dive, because as a school, you have access to all these details of what the parents and teachers say, is with speech. So you're able to pick up speech in this. These are the observations during the screening. This is just what the screener has observed, not the parent or the teacher. And then the skill development here. And then we have the recommendations for this child to go to kindergarten. This box right here, this one right here, where it says ensure you're incoming, this has been really helpful to schools who don't have the resources to accommodate students, especially for an incoming student. So for example, you're in January, school's already started, you have a new family that's enrolling, you have no idea, they moved from out of state. And for our school, it was a requirement. So any incoming students, we had them take a Chancey and Bruce because we wanted to know where they landed. And let's say this child comes up with heavy social emotional issues, maybe speech delays, maybe 2 or 3 of the pathways are really underdeveloped. They're maybe a year or 2 years behind. So this box would be checked for those students, and it would say, ensure your current or incoming school can provide extra support in the following areas. And it would say social emotional focus, fine motor, developmental, other developmental issues. And that's where you have the option as a school to say, and if this is the fact, that we love your family, we love your student, but unfortunately, we just don't have the resources to support him or her based on this assessment. This assessment is indicating that he's, severely, or you can say, you know what, we see these, we have a resource specialist and we have a class of 5 and we have 2 aides and we're really able to hunker down and help support your family on this. So based on what your school's resources are, this little box can give you an in or an out on if you can support the child. And then these are additional comments. And then the final part, which is my favorite, everyone loves a graph. Parents, we throw that in there just so visually they can see. But here are the recommendations for the child. So specifically, there's a database we have of over 150,000 recommendations. specific to each child's exact age, whether they're 4 years or 4 years, 2 months, and their exact area of where they land. So if you have a 4-year-old that's scoring 4 years, 8 months in fine motor, there's recommendations very different than a 4-year-old, 2 months who's scoring 4 years, 8 months in fine motor. So these are things that we give the parents and the school that they can do to either continue to help the child grow, or for this example here, this child is strong, so things to continue to help them grow stronger even. And then for comprehension, if you remember, this child was emerging, so he's a little bit more delayed. Here's some things a parent and school can do for the child in the area of comprehension because he's emerging. So this is the printout, and this is the report that it's a 4-page report that you get, that has all the information on it. Any questions on this?
Yeah, we have first off, Susan answered some of his questions, saying that the Chancey and Bruce program is not only what you're doing with the child in person, you're also getting feedback on the child in advance from both the parents and the teacher of the child, all of which are taken into account in the training. Can you elaborate on that, Nikki?
As far as the training goes?
No, I'm going to ask you
Oh.
about the training. I mean, in terms of the way that the feedback about the child's development that is coming from the teacher and the parent, how does that work in with the evaluation itself and the compilation of the report?
So when the parent receives, the school, first of all, receives the report first. And we have had times where directors have called me and said, John was out late with his brother's baseball game last night. He didn't get home till 1 a.m. This isn't, can we reassess, or this isn't a true read, or vice versa. And they give me some more feedback. So we're able to maybe add some more information in there as far as the comments and recommendations. And then once the school receives those results, they send that to the parents. The parents see it. A lot of our schools are using this for the beginning of the year, especially for conferences and goal setting. Also, administrators love this because you're getting clear data on your students. So this year's 4-year-old class looks very different than last year's 4-year-old class, than next year's 4-year-old class. So when you get your results for your 4-year-old, 3 to 5-year-old classes, and you're looking at your 4-year-old results, you're able to really see where your class is as a whole and more specifically. So, wow, this class, we've got stellar athletes. They're all advanced or emerging or age appropriate or strong in gross motor. But wow, their receptive language this year, 70% of them are struggling receptive language. So one, the administrator is able to help support the teacher with more curriculum or professional development or whatever else they need. And then the trickling down from the teacher to the parent, you're able to sit and do some goal setting, maybe put some things in place for home and school in that partnership, and then you reassess them at the end of the year, and you're really able to see and track that growth. Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, yes. Let me show you really quick teacher form and parent form. These are the different forms that we have. Let me just pull this in here. There we go. Incomplete ones. Oh, I was just going to pull up one here that I have. Let's see. Let's go to, I had one for biting. See if it just pulled up. Yep. Okay, so this is what I see on my end. So I see the parents form. So once the assessment goes out, the parents fill out this questionnaire. The parents will receive an email that says, hello from Chancey and Bruce, your child's going to be assessed. There's 3 videos. We have parents who love to read, so we have lots of information they can read. We have parents that don't want to read and say, give me just a 30-second video. So there's a 30-second video. This is what we're doing. Then the parents that want to know everything. And there's a 10-minute video that goes deep into the information on what each pathway is and what we look at. So we ask the parents about the pregnancy complications, if there's any unsettling experiences. If the child has an IEP, I cannot promise you that parents are honest in this area. Sometimes they're not. Unfortunately, we're able to pick up a lot of that during the assessment. And then here are the 18 questions that we ask the parents. So I can quickly just read them and go through it. Is we ask them if the child shows curiosity and interest in their surroundings, initiates their own play, works and plays cooperatively with other children, talks comfortably with other children, takes turns and shares, participates with others in large group, shows concerns for others, accepts responsibility, separates from parents without reluctance, does simple tasks independently, follows directions, pays attention, consistently completes tasks, attends to a task for at least 10 minutes, is eager to learn new tasks, able to express wants and needs, express limits, follows rules, displays feelings in an appropriate way, and speech understood by others. So as you can see, the parent for this child has put usually for almost all of them. And then you move on to the teacher's version. The teacher will get the exact same form. The good news is the parent does not get to see the teacher's responses. This has been a game changer. In the past, it was a piece of paper back 40 years ago. The parents would fill out the exact same questionnaire and then a check would be stapled. Now it's all done digitally, but the school you're able to see, especially if it's coming from an incoming school. This teacher feels the same way as the parent. And then she also wrote some comments about the child is ready for kindergarten. He's showing curiosity and lots of great things. We also have parent teachers that are spilling their guts out and saying the parents aren't listening to us. We've asked them to get an IEP. The child can't sit still. They come to school late every day, things that we would like to know as an incoming school. And then here, form 2 is the result sheet. So for this child, these are all the questions that was asked from the assessment. This is a summary of the screening on the screener's observation and what the screener saw. Sometimes there's private comments in here. We just had a student a couple weeks ago that assessed, and the parent was very adamant about sitting in the classroom while the child assessed. We don't allow that to happen because it can be a distraction. So it's very bizarre, but it's just a true story. She left her shoe and her phone behind with the child. So the screener just put it in there. Parent wanted to stay. We asked that she stay outside, but she left her shoe and the phone behind, and it ended up becoming a distraction, something that we take in consideration for social emotional. And then finally, here's the final result sheet that child gets as far as forms go. Okay.
One other couple of questions. The first is it training in person or is it online? And how long does it take?
Great questions. I'm going to share with you guys our Montessori special. We've never done this before, but one, because we loved him so much, and two, we all say if we could restart our educational careers, we'd all be Montessori from the beginning. And so we have a Montessori program right now. So the training is 3 hours. We offer in person where we come to you. We were just actually up in Rockridge last week, Montessori up in Oakland. And that's up to 10 participants. You can join one of those. So let's say your school is conducting it or another location is conducting it and you just want to send one teacher. It's $200 per individual. We do a Zoom. I did a Zoom training yesterday for 2 schools. So that's $750. We also have an on-demand, which is just a pre-recorded. We also periodically offer free training. So sometimes I'll do a free either in person or a free Zoom. We want to work with your budget, if that says anything. We want to make sure if you really want to partner with us, that the finances aren't the reason why. We just partnered with a very small school. They only have 1 classroom. They have 16 students. We figured out we had her join a training that we just did with another school, and we're offering a very reasonable rate. Normally for us, if we come to you, it's $79. If we come and assess your students, if we train you and you do it yourself, it's $50. But the Montessori special right now is $35 per student. And we have had so many schools that are expressing interest to conduct it next year to do a beginning and end. We are doing a 2 assessment for $50. So you pay that $50 once at the beginning of the year, and you're able to assess a child twice in the year. You could do it at the beginning, the middle, the beginning and end, middle and end, whatever is conducive for your school. And then the kit is $350. And we offer continual support if you have questions. And the great part is that on demand, you get automatically, regardless of what training you do. We recommend that you watch those on demand trainings right before you assess. Because like, for example, I trained a school yesterday. They're not screening until October. So I said, you guys now have the basics, but I'd love for you to watch the scoring part or any questions you might have on a pathway, maybe a week before you do the actual assessment.
Another question. Just Tim.
That's great. One other thing that I see in the chat, and we have to wrap up in a moment or two, is how would you compare the Chancey and Bruce program to ASQ? We've used it for years, toddler through 5 years old, ASQ and ASQ SE. We love it since parents fill out a copy and the school does, so we can compare the results. And that's a developmental, like a questionnaire, similar to Institute.
Ages and stages, yeah. Because because the ASQ and the ages and stages is very observational, you don't always get a true read. You're getting a parent's idea. Like I can't tell you how many times I've looked at the social emotional and what the parent and teacher say are so different. Where this is not just observational, social emotional, that's the one part that's observational, but this is standardized. So you're actually conducting an assessment, it's tracked, it's documented, it's research based. We have added a new part to the assessment where you're tracking how many redirections a child needs in each part of the question, which is very helpful. So I'm sure part of the ASQ and some of the other observational based, a parent or teacher can write the child needs redirection. Well, therefore, we know most children need redirection. And we changed that in the assessment because we had that problem. They were checking the box, the child needed redirection. Well, in a 20-minute test, every child will probably need 4 to 5 redirections at a time. But we also have students that need 25 redirections. And so you're really able to document and track those redirections or fine motor. You can say they struggle holding their pencil, but we actually can document what type of pencil grip they have. Or if they're able to do certain fine motors or they're not able to cut. So a lot of children might have okay fine motors where they're holding a pencil, but when it comes to cutting, there's a part of the assessment that we're asking the students to cut, and you're able to document if they were able to cut or if it took more than 90 seconds. So it's a little bit more formal than an observation. I guess it would, the best way I can describe it is if you do send a child to, let's say, a therapist and they're doing some observation of playing with other children versus the actual child sitting and answering questions directly to the therapist, and the therapist is asking, what would you do if your friend was sad? Or how would you, what do you consider as a good friend? They're actually being documented and there's a scoring system versus just observation in general. I think they're both great. But you're not going to get a report like this from an ASQ or an observation-based assessment.
That is great. Thank you so much. I think that that's about all the time we have for today. By the way, I know that you've been working with Clint on marketing for Chancey and Bruce because you're just really getting up and running and getting the word out. We're glad to help you. I'm about to meet with Desert Garden Montessori School, which is also working with Clint. I'm going to sit in on that right now. So for everyone who's online, I hope once again you'll reach out to Chancey and Bruce if this is a good fit for you. I know it was a good fit for many of the schools I worked for, not Chancey and Bruce because I didn't know them, but this kind of tool is really, really helpful. And I've really enjoyed getting to know you three, Susan and Nikki and Aaliyah. You're really good people. So I'm going to call it for now, and we'll see you all on Thursday. So same
Thank you,
time,
everyone.
same place, and we will be in touch soon. Bye-bye.